Story time!
Grandpa's fishing rod. Grandpa George loves fishing. He goes as often as Granny Betty lets him. Granny enjoys the time to herself, and she can read her latest book, watch her favourite TV programme, or go and see her friends. Grandpa George loves his free time too. He stands by the riverside waiting for the fish to bite. Sometimes he takes his son-in-law and his grandson with him. A proper boys' day out. They can spend hours there and not catch a thing. In fact, I can't remember the last time they did catch something. It's become a bit of a standing joke now. They say they're going to catch fish and tell Granny Betty not to make anything for tea, as they will bring the fish back to eat. But luckily, Granny always makes tea, and when they finally come back, they are either sunburnt and mosquito-bitten or freezing cold to the core, and usually in a bad mood, but always hungry. On the rare occasions that they do catch something, they are only little fish, and they are too small for anything apart from the cat's treats. But Grandpa is determined that he will catch a big fish. He has to. All kinds of weather and all times of day, he doesn't care. He wants that big fish. Granny tells him, it doesn't matter, as long as you enjoy yourself. But now he feels he has to prove it to Granny and to his daughter that he can catch a big fish. One horrible, cold, wet day, Grandpa George decided he was going fishing. It's perfect weather, he told Granny. Granny wasn't convinced. Don't you go catching a cold. It's almost Christmas, and I don't want you laid up on the sofa with man flu on Christmas Day. Don't be daft, woman, he said as he left the house. He was going on his own today. He went to his normal place, put up his little fishing tent, and got out his little tackle box. The box fell to the floor, and its entire contents fell in the dirt. Lead weights, spinners, hooks, all different sizes, and floats were everywhere, not to mention the line had rolled away and tangled around a bush. Oh, and off went the maggots, crawling away. He picked up the tackle box contents. He thought he would cast off and prop his rod. Then he would attempt to roll the line up again. He was using maggots for bait. He had put a chicken carcass in a bucket, and the odd fly that was still about had taken the bait and laid its eggs in it. He collected the maggots, and Granny Betty hated this part. After an hour of picking up and setting up, Grandpa had finally got round to casting off. It was slightly windy, and the current was making his lead weight roll across the bottom of the river. He felt a tug. He got excited and round the reel back in. He was hopeful for a big fish, as the line felt very heavy. He pulled, and at one point he thought his line might snap. He was so excited now. One last heave, and his catch flew out of the water, over his head and into the bushes. "Darn it!" he shouted. He put his rod down and went to look for his catch. He walked over to the bushes where it landed. "Great!" he said. "An old boot! Typical!" Just as he was turning to go back to his rod, something shiny caught his eye. He looked down at it and smiled. It was a rusty rod with a shiny spinner on it. It was all tangled up, and the reel was a bit stiff. He pulled the rod out and took it back to his tent. He cast it off with his old faithful and sat down to inspect the new find. In the car he had some XE39 spray. He sprayed the reel, and it was as good as new after a few winds. He untangled the line and reeled it in, and he gave it a rub with the XE39 spray, and a lot of the rust came off. It was a beauty. He set it up and decided he would give it a go. He might give it to his grandson if it was any good. Swoosh! When the weight on the line went flying over his head, the maggot swinging about, plop, and it was in the water. Straight away he felt the line tug. No way, it can't be. He reeled it in, and on the end was a medium-sized fish. He was laughing away to himself. That's beginner's luck, that is. He unhooked the fish and put it in his bucket. He cast it off again. Tug, tug. No way! Not again. In with the reel, and there was a flapping about medium-sized fish. Well, blow me down and call me Santa. Granny will be surprised. He put the fish in his bucket with the other one. Still using the same maggot, he decided that he would cast off one more time. Tug! He was laughing so hard he nearly fell in. But this time something was different. He pulled and he pulled. He fell backwards, but he kept pulling. The reel was really hard to wind in, but he was determined to bring it in. Then there it was, a huge salmon, flapping with all its might. Grandpa stood up and grabbed his net. The fish was way too big for his bucket. Granny really would be surprised. He decided that he would go home at this point. The fish was safe in the net, and he started to pack away. He took down his tent and packed away his chair, his snack box, his flask, and his tackle box. Then he looked at the rod that he had brought with him. Rubbish, he muttered as he started to reel his line in. Not a thing caught on it, not even river weed. Then he put the rod away and went to pick up the new rod. As he started to take it to bits, it started giving off little electric shocks. Grandpa dropped the rod. How strange! He rubbed his hands together again and picked the rod up. He tried again to get it ready to take home, but again it gave him electric shocks. How strange! Oh well, I'll just put it in the car like this. He got all his kit back together and went to the car and then went back for the rods. When he got close to the car with his rod, it started giving off shocks again. This time the shocks were stronger. He dropped it on the floor. I can't just leave it there, he thought to himself. As he walked back to the river, the shocks stopped. It was like the rod didn't want to go. Was that why it was in the bush? It had shocked someone and they had thrown it away. Grandpa hid the rod and went home. Granny nearly died with surprise at 3 fish. 1 would have been enough, but 3, wow! She set to cleaning them up, and Grandpa told her about the rod. I'll go back tomorrow and try again, he said. So the next day, bright and early, he got up and went fishing. He went to where he had hidden the rod, and it was gone. He looked back at the bush where he found it, but it wasn't there either. He was so sad that he couldn't find it again. He spent all day with his normal rod catching fresh air. A few weeks later he went fishing with his grandson. They passed a man smiling from ear to ear, and he had the biggest bucket of fish with him. They stopped to talk to him, and he said that he had found a rod, but it had given him electric shocks. What did you do with it? Grandpa asked excitedly. Oh, I threw it in the bushes, the man replied, and off he went. Grandpa ran over to where the man had said that it was. Neither him nor his grandson could find it. Don't worry, Grandpa, we will just fish like we normally do. Grandpa was a bit upset, but off he went. He never did see the rod again, but he saw lots of people with big buckets of fish. Granny and Grandpa had saved the salmon for Christmas dinner. They ate it and it was delicious, and then they both fell asleep on the sofa after lunch.